longer, but yeah.
Yeah, ready to teach us from the classroom. Perfect. So I feel like most of the people currently in the room already know Andrea, but just to make sure we're fully introduced. So Andrea is our English leader, qualified tutor, but also a very experienced teacher and lead English tutor at Hope Tuition Clinic and a teacher trainer. So she's been a classroom teacher, a mentor, trainer and curriculum lead across secondary English for the last 18 years. So I feel like she will have a lot to teach us today, but can vouch myself for the fact that as a STEM tutor, I've already learned a lot from Andrea's sessions, and I don't teach English at all. I have a better idea of how I might, but less interest, unfortunately, sorry. So Andrea's going to be talking to us today about how, in fact, all tutors are tutors of English, because literacy applies across the curriculum, and how we can bring that into our tuition. So thank you very much, Andrea.
Thank you for that intro. I love it. I'm just going to share my screen. So I don't actually then need to introduce myself, except to say what my sort of role is, I suppose, within qualified tutor. I have been sort of leading the English Hub in its sort of embryonic state over the last several months, but also, sorry, I'm just trying to get my presentation up. But also I am a full-time teacher, more or less, and within that I also do a lot of tuition and run my own business, and I'm actually leaving the classroom for the last time in hopefully the last time in 2 weeks to go and be a consultant teacher trainer and literacy developer for a trust in Greater Manchester. So I'm going to be one of those consultants that swans into school and swans out, and quite like the idea of it, really. But I am going to be doing what I love, which is literacy and teacher training. So you're right in the belly of what I love doing here. So just in case we get a few more people coming in, have a look at this here. We've got some morphemes here, as you can see down there. A morpheme, for those who aren't as linguistically geeky as me, it's just a posh word for a meaningful unit of language that cannot be divided further. So how many words can you make out of those morphemes? Now, some of them could go in the middle of the word, some could be prefixes, some could be suffixes. So how many can you make? Can you try and make them tier 2 or tier 3 words as well? Now, what you'll notice that I've also got is a QR code down here, and QR codes will appear on your screen, and that means that you can tap and take a picture and go to a website that is directly relevant to the information that I'm talking about on the screen. Because I don't know about you, whenever somebody is doing any sort of presentation online, I always miss things. So I thought if I get a couple of QR codes on the screen, you can then keep a tab for later to look at, because there's lots of documents and reading material that go with this. So feel free to take a picture of the QR code there, because that will take you to a list of words as well that are really useful across the curriculum. So let's see if we've got any in the chat. Tier 2, 3 words, says Jack. They are on that link on the QR code. Tiers come in, there's 3 tiers of vocabulary. One is the vocabulary that we use in everyday speech, so nothing too particularly sort of exciting, sort of a conversational vocabulary. Tier 2 tends to be quite academic language, so the language that we model and we use as tutors in our talk and in our lessons. And tier 3, which is, I'll do it like this, it's the top of the pyramid, is domain specific words, so words that would only appear in your particular subject. Now mine's English, so that would be things like simile, metaphor, imagery, symbolism. For example, in maths and science that are heavy domain specific subjects, it would be a lot of those key sort of more or less Latinate words, really, the really long words like hyperbole you might have, or you might have things like reproduction, things that are specific to a particular subject, of tier 3 words. So we want to be in the tier 2 and tier 3 category as tutors. So has anybody got any words that they'd like to share with us as we get warmed up? Acceleration, receded, I can see some of these. Defeatable, retractable, lovely. Retract, yes. Detractable, reaction, action, That's what I'm hoping that we'll do today, Helen. Brilliant. What else have we got? Acceleration's a good one, yeah. Detract, defeat, unable, reaction, they're fab. Unactionable, yes. That sort of prefix D and un, you put them almost in front of any word, as we'll find out. They contribute to a lot of our words in English. Defeating, accelerating. Now, I forgot here. Now, if we want any spelling ideas here, anything that ends in ION is a noun. So if you're thinking about communication, it could be television, even though that's not got the T. Anything that ends in ION is always going to be a noun. Okay, and anything that ends in able is always going to be an adjective. So there are certain spelling areas that can help with your students as well. Now, the next thing is how many of the words that you have done, you come up to a link to your subject. Are any of them tier 2 or tier 3 words? I can see that for some of them here, accelerating, that's definitely science. Defeating could be any subject. So have a think about any of them, and also have any of you thought now, whoops, giving you a bit of a taste of the next slide. Can you think of any more themes that could be common in your subject area? So think about things that might come at the beginning of certain words. And I know talking to Georgina about this before the session, Georgina was giving me a certain idea about what are some of the key areas of literacy and words and comprehension that science students struggle with. And sciences are very morphemically dense words, scientific terms, as are mathematical terms. And so they're often made up of several parts, several morphemes. So have a think about any morphemes that might be specific to your subject. You can either jot them down in the chat. I have got my chat bot, but I'm trying to have a look at them as well. Great, Georgina, love that one. Gravi, trop, geo, gluco, endo, yeah. Beno, chemo, they are all Latin or Greek in origin, and we'll look a little bit at that later. They tend to dominate a lot of our tier 3 and tier 2 words. Okay, so they tend to be trickier for our students, and they all have a meaning. So now we've all started with a little task. We're going to sort of look a little bit at how we can use morphemes and how we can use lots of other different strategies in this session to help you become better teachers of literacy. Not sort of having great big swathes of your sessions devoted to literacy, more just having routines maybe. Are you going to have some starter activities at the start of your sessions, similar to this, that get some students thinking a little bit about the words that they're using in your subject and making sure that they understand them. So there'll be lots of tips and tricks, as well as some information that might make Jack do a few more cartwheels if possible. So let's have a look. And now it's quiz time. So have a think about these. A few literacy stats that might blow your mind here. What is the percentage of words you think we need to know in a text to ensure that we have reading comprehension? Now, all of us do this. Is it 70? Do you think we only need to know 60% of students? Students only need to know 78%, or students need to know 95%? So 60 is quite popular at the minute. Sarah Lynn, Fatima? Right, Jack. It's gone up for 78. So is Georgina. Right, I'll do the big reveal. It's actually 95%. I know. If a student does not know 95% of the text that they are reading, then comprehension is massively inhibited. And actually, considering the Latin really difficult tier 3 vocabulary that we have in a lot of our texts, 98% is advisable for comfortable comprehension. So we really have to make sure that we are nailing literacy as much as we can when we look at stats like these. So next question. So let's see, the mathematicians might get this. Helen might get this one. So if we've got 95% in an average 300 word text, which could be a sheet, how many words may be unknown then? We're going with 15. Jack's going with 15. Quick math, stress, yes. 300 words. If it's roughly 95%, how many might that be? So depending upon the level, yeah, Fatima, that's the thing, absolutely. We're looking at an average here. Let's do the reveal. It is 15, okay? So that begs the question, 15 is quite a lot. When was the last time you read something where you didn't understand words or their meaning was unclear? 15 words on a page. That's at the very minimum, okay? Now, if we think about some of the texts that our students have to read, there's probably going to be more than that. That's an average text, all right? So we are looking at that being the bare minimum, okay? Now, by how much does explicit vocabulary teaching, so not just sort of listing words on the board, but teaching strategies, how much do they help to improve a child's reading ability? 300%, 250, 75. Jack's gone for 300. He's thinking, if it's that high, then we have to understand, maybe we need to, maybe the effect we can have is high. Helen's gone for 250, just to be different from Jack. Ready for the big reveal? Some of these other stats might have led you to think quite correctly that it is 300%. We can make a 300% difference by just explicitly teaching vocabulary to our students in a way that is outside of what we read in the text. Okay, so a few more mind-blowing stats coming. Next one. By explicitly teaching 300 to 400 words a year, and how we could split that out, think about that. You probably need to do that in terms of the subjects that you're teaching. How many words can be added to a student's vocabulary? Is it 750 to 1200? Is it 1500 to 2500? Or is it 3000 to 4000? Yes, Mary Maya is really good at that sort of stuff. She's done some bits on literacy. What are we thinking? 300 to 400 words a year now. If you've been able to click on the QR code from the first page, you'll have noticed that it's opened up sort of ideas about tiers, which I've got another QR code for it later. Hundreds and thousands of tier 2 and tier 3 words we have to get through. So what do we think we're going to do? Yes, we're looking at the full stage here, Helen. Yes. I mean, obviously with reception, you might not be teaching 300 words because that's going to be they're learning to read. I'm thinking more about when we get to more year 6 to sort of year 12, 13 level. But we are looking at, you ready? Yes. Okay, we're looking at 3,000 to 4,000. Now, the average word hoard of an average educated person is 50,000, 50 to 60,000. Let's look at the people in this virtual room having more 60,000. But we want to try, by the time our students leave school, that's the target, 50,000 words that we want them to be able to comfortably read, to be able to navigate life in a way that's going to benefit the futures. So a few more. How much then of the English lexicon has Greek origins? Now, some of you looking at some of the the morphemes that we had earlier might be able to have a good guess at this. Is 30% of our words Latin or Greek? Is it 50 or is it 60? Some of us are going quite high, 60, 50. Science and maths, big time. Yeah, they're all in there. They're mostly Greek and Latin. It is 60. Now, when you think of the technical vocab of school as well, when you add on to that, it's more like 90% of the words that our students use at school are Latin or Greek in origin. Now, we know from what those words look like, as I said at the start, they're morphemically dense. So we have got a real struggle on our hands with these students, getting them literate. I think we've got 2 more. How many common prefixes? So that's those words at the start of a word, if we don't know them, that we can take out and add on to other words. How many common prefixes make up approximately 97% of all our words? So is it 20, 35, or 40? We don't have, I'll give you a clue, we don't have as many prefixes on our words as you would think. We saw some at the start, be, in. 20, 25, we're thinking, it wasn't an option 25, but I like it, Mary Jane. She's going rogue. It is, in fact, 20. Only 20 make up 97%. And of that 20, 4 Henri, in, and dis make up 50% of the words. So prefixes are huge in terms of how they can front load and speed up the way our students can understand language. It's quite incredible that the majority of our words have those 4 prefixes at the start of them. So understanding prefixes, massively important. Last one. It is wild. How many exposures then of a new word are needed to cement a word in a student's long-term memory? So we're looking not just teaching it once. How many times do we need to repeat our teaching and maybe show the word in different contexts for it to work? How do I know these facts? Because I am a nerd when it comes to this, and it's just something that I'm really passionate about. I think we need to know these. Right, we ready? Nerds do rule. 4 to 10 times. Now, obviously, that does depend. I think, as Fatima's been saying with her quite good caveats here, it does depend, obviously, on the student and on the situation. But we need to teach word depth. And by that, I mean thinking about presenting a word in different contexts or repeating it in different sessions and repeating it several times, maybe in a session. So that's something we're going to be thinking about over the course of this session as well. So any surprises there? Is anything that has, whoops, we're on to the next one. Has anything surprised you in that? Either you can take your mic off, you can pop it in the chat. Is there anything that you've gone, wow, about? Most of it, says Georgina. It's really making us think about our literacy, isn't it? The prefixes, it shocked me when I was doing a bit of research for this as well. Yes, the gains that can be made from teaching vocab, absolutely. I mean, as an English teacher, we do it by sort of default, but it is really important, as this session says, that we all do it. Any others? Has anybody got any other stats that I might not have included that they want to share?
I was saying that 98% comfortable comprehension. I probably model by understanding with less than that, but yeah.
Yeah, it comes,
Hopefully high percentage. Mathematician, that's a high percentage.
It is a high percentage, and actually in maths as well, Helen, because we said about the technical vocab that's included, it is that high. And when I've been looking and observing lessons where there's problems written on the board and there's a question, some of the questions, actually, some of the literacy required in decoding the questions are hard. And there are some words within those questions that students might struggle with. So, you know, literacy really is something that even in subjects that might be more numerate, still need teaching.
I was doing definitions the other day with 2 students, partly because they're doing an American syllabus. So we had the American definition and the UK definition, but things like the difference between equation, expression, and formula, those of us mathematicians will probably be fine with those, but actually clarifying that this means this, it's got an equal in it. It means there's an equals somewhere in it. And that's just 3 words in the maths.
Yeah, and also you're trying to get students to be literate in symbols as well at the same time. So actually what you're trying to do in maths is twofold, is be numerically literate as well as being, you know, sort of linguistically literate. And it is a tough thing, and it's the same in sciences as well. So how can we do this then? What are some strategies that we can use? How do we ensure 95% of a text is at least understood? So what we're going to do is look through things, some strategies and some things here that can help us. Okay. Now, many subjects, as we know, have low frequency domain specific tier 3 language that I've already said, and I've just highlighted 3 there that are quite subject dense: science, maths, humanities. I was watching a geography lesson in one of the new schools I'm going to be working in, and it was all about oxbow lakes and how they're formed, and the amount of technical language that was thrown at these year 10 students was huge. And that's going to happen in any one of these lessons. So once you add to that academic tier 2 vocabulary as well, words like analyze, evaluate, all the words that we, you know, that we mention and we use, it is quite mind-blowing that students understand anything at all. So before we actually then look at specific vocab ways, let's look at the structure of the text that you use. Now, whether you teach face-to-face or whether you teach online, textbooks or sheets or digital documents form a big part of what we do. So we're looking at the genre conventions of the text. They can reduce comprehension even before students get to the vocabulary hurdle. So the majority of the subjects here will use non-fiction texts. Even in English, we use them as well. I want you to think about what are the graphological and structural features that you take for granted. You might pick out the words to support students in their learning, but how do we actually teach them to decode a text beforehand? And I've just given you an example here. We have sidebars, we have titles, we have subheadings, labels, diagrams, images. All of these things a student needs to decode before they even hit the language. And they might not be able to do that. They might struggle being able to see the sort of how they work. And so one thing that they do, particularly in primary schools as well, and this is really interesting, and I think we could do more of this, those of us that might teach secondary, is text walks. Okay. Whole text features, this is really important. The reason why these things stand out, like headings, labels, sidebars, they front load the vocab that we need to be able to understand the topic. So if we can do a text walk and highlight what the headings are, what the labels mean, what sort of predictions can we make about a text based on the images, then we are allowing students, we're opening the door for them before they then access a text. And particularly if you are tutoring a student maybe with special needs, Georgina just mentioned dyslexia, it just helps students to, let's say, to get through the gate. And it is the vocabularies in there that you need for the topic anyway. So I'm just going to give you a chance to think, and you can sort of put it in the chat, or you can contribute, turn your mics off. I just want you to think about what text features are typical in the resources you use in your tutoring. Does it go down like this? Have you got a lot of images? Obviously humanities and science, tons and tons of obviously of text like these that you'll end up having to use in your tutoring, in your teaching. Any ideas?
Can I just say that I did my thesis on teaching scientific vocabulary.
Lovely.
Which of course, with anything in the humanities, needs extra work. But I focus very much on vocabulary because it's so difficult. And I look at the individual learner and break it down. And then I say, I don't care how you remember it. Let's break it down, because they mainly have, like you said, a Latin root. So I use a simple example like anaerobic and aerobic respiration. So what does the an mean and the aerobic? And how can you relate it? My mind works on word association, other people's works on visuals and something. It can be really silly. I've got a student at the moment that there's cognito, probably everybody knows about that, and I use that, the diagrams, and put that on the bit paper, and then I explain it to him. And finally I got him to remember what gibberellins are, and he's targeted 9s, but he just doesn't remember the vocabulary, and that's the biggest challenge I think that we face. I expect you'll agree with me, Georgina. And just for any student, doesn't matter how bright they are, there's so much of it.
There is, and I think a lot of it as well is we're looking beyond exams here, and we're looking at their ability to be able to navigate texts in life. I was just looking at a stat, and we're off piece a little bit here. I was just looking at a stat from the National Literacy Trust. Some of you might have seen it on my LinkedIn and my Instagram that I've popped it on, where only 50% of young people actually check whether what they're reading online is news, is real, is true, is believable. And so we've got a real struggle to try and get our students to be digitally literate, to have their vocabulary and ideas in place so that they can navigate the world far beyond what we're teaching them. It's like a bit of a moral imperative that we get them to be able to navigate vocabulary as well as an academic one.
And of course, I won't say that they don't understand it. I'll just carry on.
Exactly, and we can just use a few. I mean, we're not going to solve everybody's vocabulary problems, but hopefully there's a few things in here today that might help us just to, you know, like I say, open the door for some of them. So here we have another idea that we can use called SEEK. Okay, it's called select, explain, explore, and consolidate. How can we teach this vocabulary in a way that, like Mary Jane said, is that so that we can make sure that our students are getting a grasp of it. And so the first thing is to look at how difficult is the reading. So selecting the right material that you might want to use, the right words, the right vocabulary. Which ones are most important to understand? If you've done a text walk, you might have already done things like that. What prior learning has been involved here? What is it that's carried on from maybe something they've previously learned? That's, you know, that's the holy grail if we can do that. You can decide that. You're the experts in your subject. And for those people asking about tier 2 or tier 3 knowledge, click on this QR code now. That will take you to a word list of well-researched academic word lists that can help you maybe in some of your deciding what vocabulary you want to use in your teaching. And once you've selected the right words to use, then we need to think about how we might explain them. And these are things that we've done today. Separate the morphemes, look for connections with other words. I could see some people doing that with percent. What are the connections? Look at what percent means. It's 100, it's Latin, isn't it? And write the word with the student. They could do their own definition. Lots of examples, and you will see here there is a link to another QR link here. I'm giving you gifts all over the place to a model that I'm going to go through called the Freya model, which is a great way of being able to teach vocabulary. So there's a couple of treats on here for you. And then finally, because we're going to do something with this SEEK in a minute, how do you explore then what this word means? Now, I'm going to give you an example in a minute, but we could use etymology. Now, that is, what is the background? What is the history of the word? Where does it come from? Is it Latin? Is it Greek? Is it Old English? Looking at synonyms and antonyms, any word families that they belong to. Can you use something from another subject? Like I speak French, so a lot of the time, even today when I was looking at one student in year 7 asked me, what does regulation mean? And so I then could look at règle, which is obviously which is French for rules, and we could look at the spelling similarities on the board. And then we looked at any other words that begin with reg or reg. And so there are things like that. Look at the background. Where does a word come from? Can you see it in other subjects? You could do little multiple choice questions. There's a couple of things down there that can help you teach students how to maybe remember some of the vocabulary. And then the last one, consolidate. So little mini low stakes tests possibly that you might do at the start of your next session. It's very different. We see them once a week if we're lucky. Okay, sometimes it might be more than that. Sometimes it might be less. But they've got a whole array of other subjects and other activities that we're doing before they come to us. So how we test and how we retrieve is massively important as tutors, more so probably than if we're teachers. This is my favourite, is the power of why. Making sure that students understand why they need to learn this word. What is important about it? What is important about decoding words in general? Now, any of these that you can see here that you're not sure of, you can always bang them in the chat, and I can try and help you out a little bit with them. But you're going to have a go at using some of SEEK in a moment. I'm just going to give you an example. And I've borrowed something from science here. But before we do, here's a question. Which subject has been described as a monolithic castle of impenetrable speech? Which subject do you think has the honour of being that difficult to learn? I knew Helen was going to say maths. Maths or science? You are right, science. Okay, it is science, and even the very definition of science shows us a little bit about what science is about. So as soon as you break down, I've given you an etymological example here of how we can break down a word. Sci comes from the Old English skein, which means to cut, And again, let's look at other words that have that in. Scythe, scissors, and it technically means separating out. So that is why science is called science, and it makes absolute sense. Okay, and you might see things in like conscience has got science in it as well. And so you can see lots of ways that elements of that word fit into why it is used. So your job is, before we go on to, oh, I've got another one. I've forgotten I've done another one. Dehydrogenate. These are the ones, if you think about it, I was thinking particularly with science, and same with humanities and maths. They are morphemically dense. Look at that, 4 morphemes. Break them down. Look at what they mean. We talked about D being one of our 50% of prefixes that make up the majority of our words. As we know, D means remove or lessen. Feel free to do like what we did at the start. We've got detract in there. If you've got any others that you can think of, that's when you can go off piece a little bit and say, what other words do we know that begin with D, E, that have that removal aspect within them? Hydro, we know means water. So that's Greek. A lot of them are. Gen, we know means as a prefix, means to bring forth, generate, generic. They come in as well. And then we've got 8, which is act as a suffix. We see it on lots of things. Conflate, immediate. They've all got an element of action implied in those words. So all of a sudden, when you know that DE means lessen, water, bring forth, and act, dehydrogenate is completely demystified. And people then know how to apply that and what it means within the context of what they're teaching. So really, for these long Latinate, morphemically dense words, break them down, go off piece, look at other words either in your own subject that have got similar morphemes in them, other subjects as well that they might use. And you are then becoming a literacy teacher. So that's just an example. But now it is your job. It is now your turn. You'll see here, I've just got the Freya model up that was on the QR code. I'm going to give you a job to do in a moment. I love the Freya model. I use it. You'll see here, the Freya model is a way of exploring a word, and it's dead easy to do. It looks great on a screen because you can see how simple it is. Put the term in here, which the teacher selects, dehydrogenate, for example, and then you write a definition of it. Now, either you can write the definition for them. You'll see with the one I've done here, physics 1, somebody has written it, their teacher's written it in, and then the students have written their own definition. What are the characteristics of the word? Some have got images, like the geography one for evaporation, and obviously orbit. What are some examples of how it's used? Could be synonyms. As I've said here, concrete applications or illustrations. You'll see there's some examples here. I've deliberately picked multidisciplinary ones: history, physics, maths. Okay. And it's not just limited to words. The maths one obviously has some images as well. And then also some non-examples. Now in English, a lot of those for me are antonyms. I will give them opposites. So if I was doing something, what was the last one I did? For example, like regulation, for example, I might then do deregulation. And then we'd look again at that prefix D and what it does. We might look at, for regulation, we might look at lawless as another antonym. So in English, we would probably look at antonyms a lot. But you could look here, and this is where I love this model, misconceptions. And there's some non-examples here that get to the heart of what the misconceptions could be of empire, of orbit, and the difference between rotation and orbit that a lot of students may well get wrong. So you could start this, coming into maths now, yeah. So you could start, this is a great way to start a session. For example, of a keyword, if you're doing something like vertices, you could even then look at the plural of vertices. Or if you whatever you're looking at, you could start the lesson with that, so that the concept around that word is really well understood and it can be filled in together. Now, before we move on to the next task, where we're going to look at sentence building, I know I'm running out of time, pick an idea from Seek. The Freya model is obviously in there as well. And just think about now, how are you going to use that? Which of our strategies that I've gone through could you use? And it might just be that you're spending time now jotting down keywords that you think, these are what I'm going to teach. I know I've got this student in year 10 coming up, I'm going to do this. Or it might be that you want to plan a little activity. Is etymology going to be the one thing that you look at? I'm going to actually dive into what the background and the history is of the words that I teach. Just a few ideas. I'll give you a couple of minutes to download a couple of ideas, click on a couple of QR codes. Please feel free to share anything as well. I'll shush for a minute.
No, it's still going on.
It's great, Jack. I love the frame model. I love anything that can be used for lots of different subjects. Right. Okay, so hopefully, just giving you a moment there to think about even just one idea that you might take with you. So the next thing, we've done lots of word level related sort of teaching and ideas here. Now we're going to look at sentence level. And we're going to think about how can we make sure that our students are writing well, writing in a way that helps them to grasp the fundamentals of our, whoops, gone the wrong way there, that can grasp the fundamentals of our subject. So here's something from obviously St. Doug Lemov, who's a bit of a godfather of education. And he said he's noticed this: coordination and subordination within writing are deeply powerful principles worth mastering. They describe the way ideas are connected. To master conjunctions, so for those of us not linguistically in the know, it's like and, but, because, things that glue our sentences together, is to be able to express that two ideas are connected, but maybe that one is more important than the other, that one is dependent on the other, that two ideas can actually exist in contrast or conflict. Now let's forget again that we're building students for exams here. To use coordination and subordination in everyday parlance is massive in terms of being able to express ourselves in our relationship with the world. So getting students to be able to do that, either in a spoken manner, which we do a lot of in tutoring, or in their writing, is huge for their expression as well as their academic ability. So let's have a look how we can do that. And this is something I'm a huge fan of. Okay, so there's another QR code coming up here. Whoops, there it goes. Hang on. No, giving all the fun away. The first one is using coordinating conjunctions. And if you've got little ones at primary school, you might have come across fanboys. They are taught this at Key Stage 2 as a nice mnemonic to remember some of the key coordinating conjunctions. And they're fantastic because what they do is they show the interrelationship of ideas. If students cannot master using these coordinating conjunctions well, they cannot do that properly. And if you think about what you're doing maybe in science or in geography, history, you need to be able to show how one idea relates to another. And if they can't do that, then even in their reading, let's forget their writing for a minute. With their reading, conjunctions in our own reading give us cues as to the manner of information that's coming next. We know that a but means that we're getting a reverse idea. And we know that a because gives us an explanatory idea. If students don't understand these conjunctions well, they're missing cues, so their comprehension is then hindered as well. And then on the other side, there are subordinating conjunctions. So they are slightly different. They give us a sense of conditionality usually, and there's a nice sort of exhaustive list there. And I'm just going to show you an example of them in writing here. So let me just get rid of that a minute so I can see. We're going to look here at an example. Now I got this online. I was looking at how do we make a chemical reaction. And these were the notes that I got. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Georgina, because I'm off piste here. I'm doing science. Chemicals react with each other. Bonds between atoms are broken, and atoms can then form new bonds. But we don't know the relationship between that information. If I say gave students two conjunctions that I wanted them to use, I want them to use before and unless. Can you explain that relationship now? So before a chemical reaction can occur, reactants must contact each other. Unless the atom bonds are broken in this reaction, atoms cannot rearrange and make new bonds. Now, all of a sudden, we have shown the relationship between atoms and bonds just by forcing students to really think about the conjunctions that they are using, so that the interrelationship, as I've said here, of ideas is mastered. And that's just with using a couple of simple words to make their sentences more fluent. That's far better than the previous box. But also it's about their relationship and their understanding of ideas. So that is something worth thinking about and about how you might use it. And so we've got another one. This is my favorite. I use this all the time in my teaching, but because so. Now, all of these ideas are taken in part, here's another QR code, from a book called The Writing Revolution. And if you click on that QR code, you will be brought to the website where you can have a look at it and you can buy the book as well. All of the resources that I've mentioned are going to be on the final slide anyway, the reading list, that I'm sure we'll be able to get sent out to people as well. But because so, my favorite, I'll tell you why. Here we go. They help us to show the relationship between things. Start your sessions with it. What did you learn last session? You're learning about fractions and decimals. Or are you going on to look at decimals and you've been looking at fractions? Correct me if I'm wrong here, Helen. Fractions are like decimals, but they are written differently. The power of the conjunction of because. Fractions are like decimals because they're all parts of a whole. And fractions are like decimals, so they can be used interchangeably. The power of a conjunction can change the relationship between ideas in a sentence. So they are very, very simple ideas that you can use with conjunctions to build sentences that are fluent and that help students to explore ideas in different ways. So I'm aware that I'm running out of time. I've got about just about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to look at a couple of things here, and then I might quickly go back to the previous slide, because for historians, geography teachers, it might be good. But sentence fragments, use that in a lesson today. We were recapping the plot of Macbeth for the millionth time with year 10, and I gave them sentence fragments and they had to fill them in to help their understanding. It gives them that leg up, and it actually then encourages them to write better. So for example, for geography here, you could have something that comes before, form Oxbow Lakes, English, Macbeth murdered the king when he visited his castle. And for maths, you can do something with corresponding angles, and finish those. So you can really pick the sentence fragments carefully to help encourage your students to make the right notes that you want them to. Unscrambling sentences, that's a nice one. It's an old one. Okay, and you can do it to say, what are we going to be doing today? Here's unscramble it. Okay, I've got here, Lady Macbeth was the catalyst in Macbeth's demise, and you can discuss that, and then probably look at what the word catalyst means, demise. And another one, shapes, images and literacy. I'm a big fan of dual coding. Ask some questions around them. What have they all got in common? If you're going to look at acute angles, for example, Helen's probably already got that. then you might think, what have these all got in common? Questions are a great use of literacy and encouraging students. And you'll see on the QR code here, that takes you to a list of Socratic questions, which are fantastic for building literacy. So there's just a few. I think I'm kind of getting, I'm going to talk a little bit about oracy in a minute, as well as the last thing to talk through. This is a key thing, and I think I do this a lot more in my tuition than I do in my teaching. One-on-one, once a few. So the talk that we have is where a lot of the learning takes place within teaching, and within tutoring. And I haven't got stats on this. I was trying to find stats, and I will find them if you want. But I know from my reading, attainment across all the subjects is improved through student talk and encouraging student talk. Literacy and numeracy skills are improved. Okay, empathy, self-confidence and resilience is improved. Okay, and so what I'd like you to be thinking about doing here is thinking about how can you model, oracy in what you're doing. And there's a couple here that might be quite useful. We've got ABC questions. And that's where you accept, build and challenge. We use them actually at my school here. For example, I'll be asking you today, what's the key takeaway you have learned in this session? Okay. Why is this so memorable? So you're building on that as part of the B. And then you could challenge something. Is there anything you think that isn't relevant to your teaching here? Has that made a difference? So ABC is a really good way of asking questions that would build on the literacy and the ability of your students to respond. The Socratic questions are here again. They're fantastic array of questions. You get grids with them on. And you could share partially formed ideas. And again, similar to the sentence fragments, it gets them to sort of finish them off. And I sometimes put things like this, and I get them and I might ask them in my little group sessions. For example, the Love Tutoring Festival supports what? Tutors still need what? And since the pandemic, tuition has what? And so already you're thinking about responses that you might have to those questions. So there's just a few things on how we can improve oracy as well with the way that we teach. It's such an important part. A lot of people think that literacy, numeracy, and oracy are the three key things that, three key skills that we need to make sure that our students have when we are tutoring. So I think that might be it. I managed to have got through it. Here is my reading list of where I've got all of my information, so my reading. We can get this out to you if you like as well, but obviously it's going to be on the recording, so you could always pause, stop, and you can always then have a look at these. But please feel free to contact me in the English Hub or on the community, within the community, and I can sort of give you any links to any of the books or any of the links, any of the QR codes that you've missed. I'm on the Mighty Networks link. Come and see me either in the English Hub or just drop me a message, and I can certainly give you some more examples as well if you've missed anything, because I realise that I've gone through quite a lot. So I'll go back to what we've got here then. I'm going to ask you for your oracy now, just before we finish. What is it that you've learned? What's your key takeaway? Why is it memorable? Is there anything that maybe we haven't included that you'd like to see? Fanboys, the gay agenda, I love that. What do we see? Any ideas? What's the key takeaway? Somebody give me something. So I feel like I've done something for somebody.
I have been absolutely agog for the whole session, as per usual with you. But I've just been having a side conversation with Sarah Lynn about how important literacy is relating to all the things that we've just been talking about well-being and mindfulness, and that if you don't have the vocabulary, if you don't have the actual literacy, it's much harder to have emotional literacy, which is just so really helpful. Thank you. And lots of really simple, straightforward, easy things that could be applied across all sorts of subject areas. So
that's what I was hoping. That was the idea. Thank you, Jack. is there anything that's been so memorable that that you've learned today that you think this is going to stick with me?
But because so.
It's my favorite. It's one of my faves.
So
but,
good. Yeah.
I
So
love
good.
it. And a lot of these ideas are from this book. This is like such a Bible. It's the writing revolution. Oh my God, it's amazing. I do urge a lot of people to pick it up, read it. I did have a link to it in one of the QRs. And the Alex Quigley Holy Trinity are really, really good books as well to read. And they're short. You can chew through them. In fact, she says, I should be on commission. Lots of them here. They're very, very short and they're really, really doable. You can get through them. So, but please do feel free. I'm aware that we've got a demo coming up. So please do feel free to contact me after the session if you like, so that I can talk you through any more of the ideas if you wish. Okay, so thanks very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure sharing my nerdiness with you all.
Thank you very much. We love your nerdiness.
I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you.
Stop sharing. There we go.
Okay, so we are